Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to be interviewing Linley Hamilton for Music at One. So the first question I have for you, Linley, is what was your favorite piece you performed and why?
Well, I think it was probably Place at the Ace. It's on the new album. It was one of those things I've kind of found it difficult to be sort of to encompass the history of jazz in my playing. I've become a modern player for the last 25, 30 years and the bebop, post-bop player. And this was a bit of fun where we kind of wrote an original tune with the New Orleans drum beat. The little drummer, Andrew McCoubrey, that we use is just a bundle of energy. And he was just driving this whole big New Orleans groove that we were sitting on top in. So it was a change of approach for the band. And it was just one of those things that came together quite cohesively on the day. And very pleased with how it worked out.
What were you doing at our age, and were your sights set in music?
Brilliant question. What age are you guys? 2021. Shockingly, I was studying for a civil engineering degree at Queen's. I had a bit of luck. I'd played in a brass band from I was about 11, and I got into a youth jazz orchestra in Dublin that was conducted by this amazing man called Bobby Lamb. Really amazing. He'd played in America, trombone player, and he was the head of Trinity College in London. So all the best players in Ireland who were kind of under 25 that played jazz, including me, because I played amateur jazz even while I was at university. Got a chance to study with this guy 6 hours a weekend for a year and a half, and that was kind of it. So, but I had absolutely no ambition to be a musician. My plan was to be a civil engineer and to do wee gigs. So it wasn't until I was about 27, 28, and I was actually a civil engineer on the Strabane flood wall. For anybody who lives in that part of the world, I was the engineer in charge of that. And it came to an end, and I accidentally got asked to do the Commitments tour, the launch of the movie in America, and the UK tour, and I asked my boss, could I get time off from the job, and he made it happen, and that was it. Then I couldn't do anything else but music full time, so it's been full time for 30 years since then.
What has been your proudest moment in your career to date?
It's difficult. I think playing with Van Morrison at the City Hall whenever the peace process was being launched, it would have been about 1995, was highly significant. Not just music; it was a really serious band. My best pal at the time, Dermot Harland, was playing saxophone in it, and he passed away subsequently after that. So it was a really big deal, I think, doing that gig and having that memory. There were around about 200,000 people or so in Belfast at the City Hall, and it was broadcast around the world. I think David Trimble and John Hume were there, and President Clinton lifted their hands in the air. I think that was kind of the memory. It was a long time ago. It was 27 years ago, but it was highly significant. I think in terms of my jazz career, headlining Cork Jazz Festival twice, once with the orchestra to launch Making Other Arrangements, and the other with my American Irish band For the Record. That was like 2018, 2020. I could never have believed as a young player that I'd have ever headlined Cork Jazz Festival. So that was a real big one. Yeah, I mean, it's an awful lot to really enjoy. I mean, some of the gigs that we have at Maggie's Farm, we've had Trio Grande and we've had Larry Golding's trio. I haven't played with them, but those have been just so incredible to be a part of, seeing the best players in the world, and just enjoying the camaraderie they create from the stage, where they're playing for and with the audience rather than to and at them. Everybody shares in the magic of the music, and I believe this in my heart. If you share something like that between musicians and audience, or musicians and musicians, it's a permanent thing that's etched. It's a scar that's etched in your heart and your head, and uh, nobody can take that magical thing, that connection that you've created in the moment, away from you.
Who are your biggest musical inspirations?
The biggest thing that really changed my life was whenever I played, believe it or not, with the Youth Jazz Orchestra at Cork Jazz Festival some 35 years ago. And we were doing support to a big American band that was playing in the Opera House, Red Rodney, Ira Sullivan Quintet. Red and Ira are both dead, but the rhythm section are still alive. Gary Dial, Jay Anderson, and Jeff Hirschfield, piano, bass, and drums. Well, I'd seen that band. I'd never seen anything at that level before. I'd never seen motivic development or some of these things that I'm really into as a player happening before. I bought the record. It was way before CDs were even invented. I bought the record and I brought it home and I played the record once. And then I went back to the record again and I played, I think it was the first track of side 2, which is a version of Herbie Hancock, Speaks Like a Child. And I have to be honest, I played that track for 6 months and I didn't play another track. And it completely transformed everything that I did musically. The way the musicians communicate together. I learned the bass solo because the bass solo blew my mind. It was a bowed bass solo by Jay Anderson, who was only a young fella at that stage, probably in his early 30s. I could sing it to you now. It was just unbelievable. And 10 or 12 years ago, my wife, Maggie, said to me, why don't you contact Jay Anderson and tell him what it means to you? And I laughed. I said, he's not gonna answer my email, you know. But I traced around the internet and I found what seemed to be Jay Anderson, bass player, and his email. And I emailed him and I just outpoured my whole love to him and said, Jay, you've transformed everything. I wouldn't have had a career in music if it hadn't been for you. The solo that you played, the bass solo, is the most incredible bass solo that I've ever heard. And thank you so much. And about a week later, I got this email back saying, hey man, I imagine that's what it sounded like to him. Hey man, just got to tell you, that's a great email, but I've never played a bass solo that was bowed. So I was just heartbroken, and I went back on and checked him out, and it was definitely him. And I emailed him back and said, hey bro, it's you. And then he rang me from America and we had a great laugh. He'd forgotten he'd done the solo. And about 8 years ago, I was working with Adam Nussbaum, Mark Egan, who's the drummer and bass player in my current album band, 2 American guys. And Maggie and I were going to New York for a holiday. And Adam says, why don't you play with us at Bar 55? And I said, wow, sure, you know. So there was a great pal of mine, Anders Bergkrantz, who I guess is one of the best jazz trumpet players in Europe. We've worked together a few times. And he was going over there. So we hooked up and we went to the gig and we played the gig. And Adam looked at me at half time because he knew the story. And he says, are you not going to say anything? And I said, well, what about? He says, the bass player. I said, what about the bass player? He says, it's Jay Anderson. Jay looked at me. He knew it was me. I didn't know it was him. And I just broke. And then we hugged. And probably one of the best moments of my life. Probably one of the best moments of my life. And totally inspirational. And the way they play music for each other, and the way they communicate together. And whenever I've been lucky, obviously Adam and Mark are in my band, and I tour with them an awful lot, and they stay here at the house an awful lot. You get to pick their brain, and all they want to do is play music that has changed their lives. And all I want to do is play music to people and recommend music that has changed my lives. Because I think once you realize that playing an instrument is a very, very small part of what you're doing. It's just a facilitator. All you're really playing is what's in your head and your heart. So if you can develop your head and your heart into a really high level machine that's producing lines for you to play, and your facilitation is good enough to deliver them, then you realize at the end of the day that one of the only things that's going to get you to move to a higher elite level as a player is to listen to high level elite music and to digest it and to understand it, and then to try and reproduce it.
What is your strategy for learning new pieces?
The most important thing about playing any new piece is to internalize the best possible version of it. So that's why Sean and I would say in class, you know, which version of this piece are you listening to? You know, is it a bona fide high level version? It's really, really important that it's a bona fide high level version. So I obviously know what to source in that direction. I know who the players are. So if I haven't written the piece and I'm playing it, I'm playing a piece that I've targeted to play because it moves me or whatever, then I'm picking the right piece. I'm making sure that I can play the melody. I know what the chord sequences are in my head. And then I go into the barn, I get the trumpet, I do my normal 45-minute warm up because I wouldn't dream of playing anything. I wouldn't disrespect any music by not being in the right shape to play it, even in the practice room. So I would do my 45-minute warm up, take a break, and go in and then make that my target for the 2 hours. And the first thing I would do is I would do a thing called an accelerated air test or accelerated air exercise. So it's about 5 or 10 minutes. I basically play a long note on a piano for 6 beats and then accelerate to 40 for 2. And I do that for 5 or 10 minutes because that then makes sure that phrases are going to be as close to spoken or linguistic as I can make them. The air is going to support them through. It's going to be accelerated air, and therefore any articulations that I do will become a smooth contour of the melody. Whenever I look at the improvisations, the first thing you're looking at is the vertical language of those chords. So I'm making sure I know my arpeggios and I'm making sure I know my scales. And I'm maybe linking little exercises between them. There's a thing called voice leading where you're kind of looking at the third and the seventh of the chords and you're using those to link across the lines. And I practice that kind of stuff. I go to the filing cabinet in the head, which I've talked about in class, and I pick out 3 or 4 things I need. One is always angularity. So I'm looking for bigger intervals. So I'm thinking about that. Maybe I do a few exercises, just nothing to do with the piece, on angular intervals of a fourth or more. Another thing is the dynamic contouring thing where I talk to myself to remind myself that, you know, there are 3 or 4 different target areas in this piece where there's going to be a lower dynamic partnering a release onto a chord tone, or a bigger dynamic partnering some kind of tension that's happening within the piece. And I kind of just think about those things before I play, and then I practice with a metronome, and I play through the piece, and you know, I reflect after maybe 5 or 6 passes, and then I maybe find something that I really liked, and then I motivically develop it. I might take a wee bit of a line or fragment of a line and just try it, invert it, extend it, harmonically transfer it. So you're maybe developing that wee musical line, but you're changing the language of it, the notation of it, as you go through the different consecutive chords. And I just kind of repeat until the muscle memory is as close to perfect as it can be.
So the last question I have for you, Linley, is any advice for students hoping to find a career in the performing industry?
You have to create the opportunities for yourself. I sometimes think, you know, the classical, maybe violinists or clarinet players or classical singers, you know, they obviously have a lot of choral opportunities, and most choral opportunities possibly may not lead to income generation. I don't think there's that many professional choirs around that are going to give you 500 a week if you're singing second alto or whatever. So you've got to work on ways to create performance opportunities for yourself. There's absolutely no point in getting to this stage of your career at 21, having played for 10 or 11 years, being really good in your instrument, whether it's a classical instrument, a rock and pop, or a finger pick guitar. It's irrelevant. You can't invest this kind of time to be this good at what you are, and then to throw that away and think, well, I'm now going to start as a mechanic and I'm going to knock the music in the head. You can't afford to do that. You have to find performance opportunities, whether you create a string quartet, whether you create some kind of military band rehearsal scenario, semi-pro kind of thing, or amateur thing, whether you're trying to become a soloist. You have to eventually think, you know, I'm 21, I have 50 years playing left. It's not good enough to do 100 gigs in 50 years. It's not good enough to do 2 gigs a year. It's good enough potentially to do 2 gigs a week. But, you know, you probably need 3 or 4, or you need to be a recording artist or a session player or a touring musician, or working with Riverdance or Eagle's Wing, or some of these big touring productions that are out there and are constantly being written and created time and time again. You need to be creating these opportunities, and then you need to be practicing for those opportunities. You need to be working out what your strengths are going to be. But I can tell you with 100% confidence, knowing the industry is inside out as I do, there are limitless performance opportunities. So you have to use those opportunities, but you have to create them yourself. Don't wait for the phone to ring. Make it ring. You ring it. You find out the industry. You find out the players. You find out the venues. You find out the gigs. Get to know the players in your instrument or the singers who are singing your stuff. Volunteer to cover for them if you need to dep, and make it happen. And the more you do it, the more everything connects. But believe in yourself, and let's take it from there. Whenever I was your age, I had nowhere near the talent that you guys have. And I've had a brilliant career. I've loved it. And hopefully there's some time left for more of a new album coming out next year. So just keep believing, keep starting, keep practicing, keep learning, keep gigging, keep going to gigs, keep finding out who the venues are, where the festivals are, check the music out online, and join the game.
Thank you, Linley.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for being a brilliant, brilliant host for Music at One Semester One.